September 14th, 1942, North Atlantic, 400 miles east of Newfoundland. The sea is black glass under a moonless sky, and the only sound is the low growl of diesel engines echoing inside a steel hull. Kapitän Leutnant Heinrich Lehmann Willenbrock, commander of U-96, leans over the periscope, his eyes flicking from shadow to shadow across the horizon. He's hunting. Somewhere out there, crawling through the dark, is an Allied convoy. Dozens of merchant ships heavy with food, fuel, and steel bound for Britain. In this moment, the Atlantic isn't an ocean. It's a battlefield without borders, and the hunters are winning. At this stage of the war, the U-boat captains called it the happy time. Allied convoys moved slowly, often without air cover, their escorts few and poorly equipped. Lehmann Willenbrock's submarine, like dozens of others under Admiral Karl Dönitz's command, operated in deadly coordination, wolf packs prowling the shipping lanes. When one U-boat spotted a convoy, it shadowed silently, broadcasting coded messages that summoned others to the kill. Then, under the cover of night, they attacked together. Inside U-96, the crew moved like a single organism, 44 men packed into a metal tube barely large enough to stand upright in. The air was thick with diesel fumes and sweat, the walls dripping with condensation. When the klaxon sounded, they scrambled to stations. Torpedoes slid into tubes, engines slowed, and the boat went silent, drifting just below the surface. Above, the rumble of propellers grew louder. "Range, 800 meters," whispered the first officer. "Bearing steady," Lehmann Willenbrock replied, eyes fixed to the periscope. He waited until the silhouette of a freighter crossed the vertical line of his sight. Fire 1, fire 2. Two violent hisses filled the control room. 30 seconds later, the sea erupted in a flash of orange fire. Men below deck could hear the distant screams, the groaning of metal as another merchant ship slipped beneath the waves. The U-boat slipped away, undetected. Another kill. Another victory for the Kriegsmarine's unsinkable strategy. Back in occupied France, propaganda posters showed U-boats as sleek predators, striking at the soft underbelly of Britain. Berlin radio boasted of tonnage sunk, 40 ships in 1 month. Dönitz's wolf packs had effectively cut Britain's supply arteries. Food rationing worsened. Churchill himself admitted that the U-boat menace was the only thing that truly frightened him. To the Germans, it felt like technological superiority, and training had guaranteed dominance beneath the waves. They relied on the Enigma machine, its rotating ciphers believed to be unbreakable. Every convoy sighting, every order, every position report went through it. Dönitz's communications were organized chaos, but to him, it was perfect control. And so, the U-boat captains mocked the Allies. They called their convoys Entenschießen, duck hunting. They joked that British sailors were too slow to react, too blind to spot the periscopes that stalked them. When the Allies tried new tactics, zigzagging formations, decoy ships, sonar, they were dismissed as futile. "They can't hide forever," one German captain wrote in his logbook. "They only delay their drowning." But far above the Atlantic, in a small English estate in Buckinghamshire, something extraordinary was happening, something the U-boat men could never have imagined. Behind the ivy-covered walls of Bletchley Park, mathematicians, linguists, and engineers were prying open the secrets of Enigma. Each morning, coded German transmissions were plucked from the air and rushed to a group known only as Ultra. Alan Turing and his team worked tirelessly, feeding intercepted messages into an enormous machine of clattering rotors and lights, the bomb. Every successful decryption was a weapon, convoy positions saved, submarines ambushed, and traps laid. The U-boat commanders had no idea the hunters were being hunted. By late 1942, Allied radar and sonar had also evolved dramatically. Airborne radar could now spot periscopes slicing through the surface at night. Surface escorts, equipped with new Huff-Duff radio direction finders, could triangulate U-boat transmissions in seconds. But the Germans were confident, arrogant even. Their code still changed daily. Their submarines still struck with deadly precision. The North Atlantic was their empire, until the convoys started fighting back. In November, convoy ONS 154 set sail with heavy escort, including new Flower-class corvettes, fitted with advanced radar and depth charges. When U-123 made contact, it radioed for reinforcements as usual. But this time, the response was silent. The Allies had already intercepted the message and turned the tables. For the first time, the hunters were walking into a trap. December 1942. The North Atlantic was no longer silent. The surface throbbed with the pulse of war. Searchlights sweeping across black waves, depth charges cracking like thunder underwater, and the eerie wail of sonar pings echoing through steel hulls. U-123, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Müller, had just received orders to intercept convoy ONS 154. He assumed it would be another easy ambush, a slow-moving train of merchant ships begging to be sunk. But as he peered through the attack periscope, something didn't feel right. The convoy's formation was tight, its escorts alert, their radar dishes spinning like restless eyes in the dark. Müller dismissed the unease. "They can't see us underwater," he muttered. "They never do." He ordered a torpedo launch on a British freighter. The impact was perfect, a direct hit amidships. A column of water and flame rose into the night. The crew cheered, but seconds later, a new sound pierced the air, sharp, rhythmic, mechanical. Ping, ping, ping. "Sonar contact," shouted the hydrophone operator. The sound grew louder. Then came the roar, depth charges exploding above, sending shockwaves through the submarine. Bulbs shattered, pipes cracked, gauges burst. Men were thrown against the bulkheads as the hull groaned under pressure. "Dive! Deeper!" Müller yelled, gripping the periscope housing. The lights flickered red as the sub plunged to 180 meters. The air grew thin and hot, condensation dripping like rain. Every man held his breath. Another explosion. The hull flexed, rivets popping like gunfire. The Allies weren't blind anymore. Above them, the HMS Snowflake, a Flower-class corvette, was sweeping the sea, with its radar locked on Müller's position. The British had cracked the Germans' daily Enigma code that morning. They knew exactly where the wolf pack would strike and had waited patiently for them to appear. For hours, U-123 tried to escape. It surfaced briefly, its conning tower slicing through the icy water. But within minutes, a shape appeared overhead, a black silhouette against the stars. A B-24 Liberator bomber, part of the new Coastal Command patrols, swooped down and dropped flares that turned the night into day. The submarine was fully exposed. "Crash dive! Crash dive!" Müller shouted, but it was too late. Depth charges fell like rain, their detonations folding the sea around them. Inside the sub, lights went out completely. The crew could only hear metal bending and water hissing through micro-fractures. Then, silence. Only a trail of oil and bubbles remained. Elsewhere across the Atlantic, similar scenes unfolded. Convoys, once terrorized by unseen hunters, now traveled under a dome of radar and air cover. The Allies had learned the rhythm of the wolf packs, their favored routes, their tactics, even their pride. Ultra-intelligence fed this knowledge directly to convoy commanders, who could now steer around danger or ambush submarines mid-hunt. The psychological reversal was brutal. German U-boat crews, once confident predators, became prey. They began surfacing less, transmitting less, conserving torpedoes as the ocean itself turned hostile. Even refueling at sea became deadly. Milch cow supply submarines were hunted down one by one, starving the packs of fuel. By early 1943, Dönitz began to notice something he had never seen before: radio silence from his captains. One by one, U-boats failed to report in. Convoy battles that once brought glory now ended with entire flotillas disappearing. In the war rooms of Berlin, officers pored over maps covered in red pins. Dönitz refused to believe that Enigma could be broken. "It is mathematically impossible," he insisted. "They are simply getting lucky." But luck had nothing to do with it. Across the channel at Bletchley Park, Alan Turing and his colleagues were working 20-hour days, decoding intercepted U-boat messages almost in real time. Their findings were sent under the code name Ultra directly to the Admiralty. Every convoy reroute, every radar sweep, every successful depth charge strike stemmed from those secret reports. But Ultra wasn't the only factor. Allied technology had leapt forward. Ships were now fitted with centimetric radar, capable of detecting even the small periscope head of a submerged submarine. The introduction of the laid light, a blinding searchlight mounted beneath patrol aircraft, turned nighttime attacks into executions. Submarines caught on the surface had no time to dive before they were illuminated and bombed into oblivion. The ocean, once the U-boat sanctuary, had turned into their coffin. In February 1943, U-606 attacked convoy ON-166, sinking 2 ships before being cornered by the Polish destroyer Berza and the US Coast Guard cutter Campbell. Pounded by depth charges, U-606 tried to surface for air, only to be rammed amidships and torn apart by gunfire. Survivors who floated to the surface were shocked to see American and Polish sailors working together. One German officer whispered, "This cannot be happening. They find us even in the dark, and they would keep finding them because the darkness no longer belonged to the wolf packs." May 1943. The Bay of Biscay. The night air was heavy with salt and oil fumes as a convoy of battered U-boats limped home toward their bases in occupied France. They were supposed to be returning from victory patrols, but the decks told another story. Patched holes, missing guns, blackened scars where aircraft strafing runs had nearly split them apart. The war beneath the sea had turned. Inside the conning tower of U-230, Oberleutnant Hans-Dieter Heinecke stared at the horizon. What was once a triumphant journey home now felt like an execution march. Allied aircraft patrolled the skies around the clock. Every ripple, every glint of moonlight could betray their position. The men spoke in hushed tones as though afraid the ocean itself had learned to listen. A sharp voice broke the silence. "Aircraft, bearing 260. Heinecke's heart stopped. Out of the darkness, twin beams of light burst from the clouds, the dreaded ley light. Seconds later, machine gun tracers sliced the night. A British Wellington bomber dove low, its bomb bay doors yawning open. "Crash dive," Heinecke shouted. But the submarine was too slow. Bombs splashed into the water around them, detonating with deafening force. The U-boat's bow lifted violently, then slammed back down, plates buckling. Water poured in through ruptured seams. Men screamed, fumbling in total darkness. By dawn, U-230 was gone. Only a slick of oil floated on the surface, a faint rainbow sheen marking another casualty in the Atlantic graveyard. Across the theater, it was the same story. Between March and May 1943, the German U-boat fleet suffered catastrophic losses. Over 40 submarines destroyed in just 2 months. Dönitz, now commander-in-chief of the Kriegsmarine, was forced to face an unbearable truth. The tide of the Battle of the Atlantic had turned against Germany. At his headquarters in Paris, he stared at the latest reports. Convoy after convoy had reached Britain unscathed. Allied escorts now hunted U-boats with surgical precision, guided by radar, sonar, and ultra-decrypts. Submarines that once roamed freely were now lucky to survive a single patrol. Dönitz clenched his jaw, his pen hovering over the map, littered with red crosses. "We are blind," he muttered. "Someone is seeing everything we do." And indeed, someone was. At Bletchley Park, Rows of operators in headsets were intercepting German naval traffic 24 hours a day. Every coded message that passed through Enigma was logged, decrypted, and analyzed. The British knew where each wolf pack lurked before the Germans even fired their torpedoes, but the secret was too valuable to expose. When Allied forces sank a U-boat, they never mentioned ultra-intelligence. They credited routine patrols or lucky radar sightings. The secret of their omniscience had to remain buried until war's end. For the men inside the U-boats, the change was incomprehensible. The same tactics that once guaranteed success now led to disaster. Their coded signals betrayed them. Their stealth was useless. The Atlantic, once an open hunting ground, now bristled with unseen sensors and aerial predators. They felt hunted by ghosts, ships that appeared out of nowhere, aircraft that attacked through the clouds, depth charges that found them even in total silence. One U-boat radio operator wrote in his diary, "We no longer fear the enemy we can see. We fear the one who hears us before we even speak." By late May, Dönitz ordered a complete withdrawal of U-boats from the North Atlantic. It was the first time in the war that the Kriegsmarine conceded defeat in an entire theater. The wolf packs, once the pride of Germany's naval might, had vanished into history, undone not by brute force, but by information, mathematics, and invisible waves of radar. The surviving captains returned to port hollow-eyed, their faces pale from months without sunlight. Gone were the swagger and laughter that once filled the U-boat pens of Lorient and Saint-Nazaire. Now there was only silence and the smell of diesel. Engineers worked frantically on new designs, the Type 21 electro-boot, faster and deeper diving, but time was no longer on Germany's side. The Atlantic lifeline to Britain was secure. The U-boat war was lost. In London, the victory went largely uncelebrated. Bletchley Park's triumph had to remain a secret, hidden even from the men whose lives it had saved. Alan Turing and his Codebreakers continued their work in anonymity, their contribution known only to a handful of top officials. But every ship that reached Britain with food, fuel, and weapons carried silent testimony to their genius. And far below the waves, the wrecks of hundreds of U-boats lay in cold, eternal darkness. Their steel hulls, once the terror of the Atlantic, had become monuments to a vanished empire of shadows. The men who once mocked the convoys never understood what truly defeated them. It wasn't luck. It wasn't numbers. It was the moment when human intellect reached into the chaos of war and turned secrecy against the secret keepers. By 1945, the wolf packs were no more. The hunters had been hunted, the predators blinded, and the sea, at last, was silent.